Here we go. Oh, yes, it is. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Angie. Appreciate you helping get all this set up, since I wouldn't have a clue how to do it. Yeah, I reached out to like Angie, Jeff, a couple of members on the OFO board to put this together kind of last minute, just because I super enjoy talking about birds and different elements like Angie listed off that in that bio. But I definitely find it hard sometimes with family life and work life and trying to be birding at certain times to like schedule things far in advance. So it was really awesome to be able to put something together on this like short notice fashion, and then to have everyone show up to hear it. It's exciting to see that it's panned out. I don't have a big preamble, and like I can tell everybody that I recorded this video like over a month ago. It might be close to like 2 months ago now. It's like about a 15 and a half minute video, and on the topic of sort of finding rare birds or finding unusual birds. But I didn't record it with the intention of playing it for an OFO meeting. So I think it'll be really cool too to get sort of some feedback from everyone. It's not super long, so I think there'll definitely be time for questions at the end. So it has been recorded in a sort of maybe faster pace, cover several topics in quick succession sort of format. So yeah, like if you have any questions, jot them down. Definitely like stick around at the end. And I could probably share too, once the video ends, just some of my like thoughts of what I was trying to convey throughout the video and some of the general themes. And you can let me know if that comes through or not in the product that we put on.
Perfect.
But yeah, it really comes from a place of I like birding. Watching birds is my sort of biggest hobby in life. Like I love spending time with my family. The traditional stuff is you need to work and spend time with your family wherever you can and loved ones and friends. Birding has always been sort of my hobby from a perspective of like winding down, or that quiet time or that calm time, or introspective, or regenerate my recharge my batteries sort of thing. So I really love the hobby, and it's wonderful to have so many great people in the community. But over the years I have also sort of noticed that there's this perspective of some people would say that once you really get into birding, then you are driving to see birds and you're working on getting your list as high as possible. And that sort of pop culture take on those really keen birders is you get in an airplane and you fly halfway across the continent to see one bird and fly home again, and it impedes on your well-being at times, because it's like that is true for some people. But over time I kind of wanted to think of ways where I could sort of share my interest in the hobby from a perspective of birding is super fun. It doesn't necessarily have to be competitive. And maybe just to highlight how ways I think, bird study and, discovery, testing out theories and sort of finding new things on your own is sort of, in my opinion, a really cool way to take the hobby really seriously too. Like it doesn't have to be that sort of intense competitive approach. So that's kind of where I was coming from when putting this together in some past videos that I've been working on. But, as Angie noted, and early on, it's like a lot of people like the notion of finding unusual birds or rare birds. So I was hoping that this one would kind of come together in a way that would resonate with people. And we thought we'd put on this webinar. So sort of the biggest, like my preamble. I don't know if we want to just dive into the video, Angie. And
well, here's what I'm thinking. Given that it's a video and sometimes they take a lot of broad width, I would suggest that everybody except Brandon, if you're still using video, let's stop our video. So click on the bottom left where it says stop video, because that tends to make things run more smoothly sometimes. And secondly, my other thing is, if you do have a question through the video, please feel free to type it into the chat as we're going along, so that you don't forget your question, and then we can address those at the end as well. And other than that, I'd say let's run the video.
Okay. Angie, maybe I should have checked with you on this. Do you want me to share it through my screen?
Sorry, I was still muted. Okay, yes, click
Yeah.
on share screen there.
Right. You can use the comment.
There we
The
go.
comment window if for any reason anybody doesn't have audio or anything.
Yeah. If you
Get that
click
set up
on
on.
full screen as well, you're going to get a better picture, everybody. I just remembered to do that.
Okay.
Here we go. Brandon, we've got video here, but no sound.
Okay. Well, I've got sound, but
Do you?
I definitely don't want to listen to myself.
Hmm.
You have to set up the settings when you're sharing the screen for video and audio. Sorry to be,
Oh, really?
yeah. So it has to allow your microphone and your settings. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear it.
Okay.
So
Do
when
you
you
know?
share, there's
Yeah.
two little boxes. Are you sharing or he's sharing?
Brandon.
Yeah.
So when you stop sharing for now, go back and before you share, there should be two boxes to tick off, which will allow your microphone and your.
Okay. Give me
It'll.
2 seconds. I'm gonna hit play for 2 seconds. Let me know if you hear.
You have to stop sharing. Yeah.
You're in the field, especially when it's at a place where you've spent.
There you go.
Okay.
Was there
Worked.
sound there? Okay. All right. Take two.
Thank you. Yes.
It's super exciting to see something unexpected when you're in the field, especially when it's at a place where you've spent a lot of time previously. And having that right bird with the right documentation can sort of be this grand slam of getting all the birding clicks excited. A couple times a year, I'll get a message from someone saying, "Oh, what do you think I should do? Where do you think I should go to find something rare? What do you think the right day is going to be? Where do you think the right hotspot's going to be?" And over time, I started to try to distill it down. Where I thought, what are some of these like core fundamental elements that have really helped me when I'm in the field looking for vagrants? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break it down. The standard initial one is chance favors the prepared. Knowing the patterns on when and where vagrants have occurred in the past can help you predict what might happen in the future. And I honestly think that this is what records committees were formed for 40, 50, 100 years ago. This information wasn't readily available. So I thought, well, if we can compile this information and get it out there, then people can learn from it and they can build on it and discover more exciting things in the future. But a huge part of being prepared is knowing the common bird species, knowing where they tend to be, what they tend to look like, how their plumage changes throughout the year, or what extremes that you might see within a species. That's the more familiarity you get in that realm, the more likely it is you're going to hone in on something unusual when it is in front of you. The sort of next point builds off that thought where the more you study birds, the more time you spend in the field, you should really start to expect to see unexpected things. Not necessarily vagrants, but you should also be seeing aberrant plumages or hybrids or seasonal anomalies, birds that aren't supposed to be in that place or that time. Even escaped pets, you'll see budgies or parrots flying by. Those are all kind of signs that you're on the right track if that is your goal to find a rare bird. To see these other anomalies and start recognizing them for what they are. I don't want to get too much into the birding community side of it, but I do think that is sometimes a bit of a issue within different groups of people where someone might start questioning someone else's observations, and it usually revolves around, oh, did they get photos or did they not get photos? But I do think that notion of expecting to see other weird birds in the field, not just everything weird is or should be something rare, is what kind of gives people that feeling or that impression. There's lots of hybrid gulls that could, in theory, start to look like another vagrant species due to their mixed traits. Or, you could have a bird that looks a lot like a California gull, but is it 100% a California gull? Birds hybridize. So that is sort of where I think some of that comes from. If you should really be honing in on lots and lots of differences, not everything different is rare. And my goodness, I know not everyone has a chance to have camera gear, but if you do, I super, super, super recommend photographing anything unusual that catches your eye. And that's not to show other people, but it's for you. It's a remarkable learning opportunity. You can revisit that anomaly at any point in the future as you learn more about birds, or as you hear something new or see something different in the field, and then you want to cross-reference past examples. There's a lot of relatively affordable, relatively high zoom point and shoot cameras that are going to help you document these things. And this is an example for me. I'm not well versed in how to tell some plumages of semi-palmated sandpiper and western sandpiper apart. I took this picture 10 years ago, and I'm still not totally sure which one it is between the two, but maybe someone will tell me in the comments, or maybe I'll figure it out at some point. But I've done that so much, where having this sort of back catalog of things to learn from and reference is super invaluable. Another big one that's hit me over the years is this detectability bias. What does that mean? For me, it's a bird species like varied thrush, where local birders where I live in Ontario would say it's a rare bird, but you would expect a couple to be seen every year. Whereas I started to realize that a lot of these records involve people seeing them at their backyard bird feeders. This big striking bird shows up, and it compels them to get pictures and reach out to people who they might know to say, oh, can you help me with this bird, or what is this? Or they figure it out on their own, but word spreads because that bird makes itself so obvious. And the flip side would be like chestnut-collared longspur, which breeds closer to Ontario than varied thrush, but would be considered this mega rarity. I just kind of realized that they're not in people's backyards, and most of their plumages are not particularly flashy. Like, they hide from people. They spend their times way out in fields where a vagrant isn't likely to be detected. So I do think it's entirely possible that there would be more chestnut-collared longspurs in Ontario in a given year, just none of them are being noticed. Another kind of on the nose one, but it's definitely if there's a hot spot or a flurry of activity happening, being in the thick of things and seeing a higher number of birds is going to improve your chances at finding a vagrant. Sort of building on that thought a little bit, but I also like to try to stack my habitat types. This is a tip of Point Pelee, great spot for lake watch, great spot for seeing gulls and shorebirds land on the sandbar. You do a 180, and behind you is the narrow spit of trees that comes to a point. You've got songbirds in the trees, you've got swallows and raptors sheltering on the wind, the leeward side of the trees. So, the more habitat types that you can sort of stack together, the more species there are to sort of draw from for a potential vagrant to show up. Another one I do all the time is, if I'm going to do a stationary watch, like a hawk watch or, morning flight, doing one near a marsh is kind of that added value where you can just kind of keep an eye as to what's going on over the marsh, even if it's not really your primary goal of birding that morning. Another big one for me is getting really good looks at the birds. Seeing them up close or seeing them while they're active helps you notice differences, helps you notice details, can even help you take pictures if you need to or want to. Gulls are a great example where gulls at a landfill are active, their wings are up, their wings are down, they're fighting with each other. You're taking it all in. When you compare that to like a distant group of sleeping gulls where they can keep their heads down for half an hour at a time, where they're mostly hidden, like really seeing the birds up close, seeing them well, seeing them in good light makes a big difference. And the flip side of that is the birder perspective, where if you're at a lake watch and a strong wind or driving rain can help bring birds in closer to shore to see, you are going to want to find some shelter because the wind can shake your scope and make it hard to see details, or the rain or the cold can affect you and your body, your ability to take pictures. So find some shelter, and that'll improve the experience for you as well. Another interesting thing I found over the years is to embrace the slow days. By nature, some of these vagrant bird species are going against the grain. They're doing something weird. They're moving in a direction that the other birds aren't moving, and that's how they've ended up off course. So, it might be the peak of migration, and I'll hear birders say it. Or they'll say, "Oh, I thought it was going to be better today, but whatever, I'll call it quits, and maybe tomorrow." But one bird can make a big difference. So, sometimes being in those situations can pay off. Sort of on that, this is another one where you might sort of ask yourself, what are my goals when I'm out birding? This one's a bit antisocial, but if you really, really do want to improve your chances at finding rare birds, checking spots with less birder coverage can help. There might be something really striking at a sewage lagoon or at a roost location, but if no one's been there for a month, then no one's noticed it, so it could just be standing there waiting for you. Another big one I've noticed, using lake watching as an example, that a lot of people will scan the horizon with their spotting scope, and you get this sort of really narrow view of what's going on around you. But vagrants seemingly are just as likely to be up high or down low or moving right along the shoreline. So just keeping sort of an eye on a larger portion of the sky or a larger area of the habitat around you could improve your chances, as opposed to just narrowing in on one specific spot. And it's not just lake watching too. I've noticed at morning flight or at hawk watches, certain species will be common that day, and they have a height that they like to fly or a distance they like to fly away from a shoreline. But each bird kind of has its own different preferences. So there is a decent chance that a vagrant might not be embedded in the flight path of all the common birds that day. It might be higher, farther, closer, or lower, just off from the other common birds. That sort of ties into this one where I'll say bird every bird. If there's two big rafts of ducks offshore and you scan through the one flock on your left and you scan through the other flock on your right, and you think, oh, I've scanned almost every bird here and I haven't seen anything different, I'll move on. I do think there's a decent chance that vagrant is not in that flock of common birds. It's tucked up against the shoreline, standing on the rocks. And if you're not hunting out those sort of isolated individuals, you might be decreasing your odds of spotting something different. Here's the one ring to rule them all. That's a bit on the nose, but obviously, like hurricanes and big storms can blow birds off course. That's well known, like petrels come in and off the ocean, but it's not actually the point that I was hoping to make here. I think a critical, interesting part of incorporating weather is that almost every other point that I've mentioned so far does actually have some weather elements to it, if you think about it. Patterns of vagrancy may be tied to climatology from the perspective of what the weather norms are for a given location at a date and time, but also what the extreme limits are of what we might expect for weather at a given place at a given time. It might be that push that really forces a bird to move beyond its normal limits of when it wants to migrate or what migratory paths it wants to take. And on the birder side too, right? Being able to get good looks at birds or see them well, whether it's the sun at your back or having the right wind direction to concentrate flight lines of birds. The weather sort of ties into each one of those points. This one is more personal for me, where I'd really say keep an open mind when you're in the field if you're keen on finding vagrants. It really surprises me how many birders I see that see a meadowlark locally where I live and they say eastern meadowlark because that's the only option. It just seems like a lot of people close off the other possibilities immediately. They don't give it a chance. They don't ever say, well, why isn't it a western? It's still most likely going to be an eastern, but that questioning is a great learning opportunity, but you got to at least consider it sometimes. Otherwise, you're definitely not going to find a vagrant if you always assume they're never going to be there. And it's not just the super hard to identify birds like meadowlarks either. Like I'm guilty of it, where there's no yellow-bellied kingbirds where I live. They really stand out, but for some reason, it's the brain just defaults to, well, what's the most likely one, rather than like really giving it some critical thought and working through the different possibilities, even if some are more likely than others. But to circle back to the super hard to identify species, say you're keen to try to find your first European herring gull now that the species have been split, you really got to be honest with yourself about what we know or what you know or what's possible to know about some of these super hard IDs. It is easy to pigeonhole some possible field marks or some potential features and say, well, it must be this because this, when birds are variable and there's still a lot we don't know and we're learning every day. So you got to keep that in mind to not go too far in the opposite direction. I did mention at the start how the right flashy vagrant, the right time, the right place can bring birders of all clicks and skill levels and interests together, into this excitement. But also, sort of the wrong situation or the wrong attitude can really turn them all off in their own unique ways. So I think if you are super keen on finding vagrants, it would be really helpful to keep that open mind and to learn and to treat your identifications as fluid, where you don't have to know everything right away before you see every bird. You can grow with time. You can change your IDs as you've learned new things in the future, as you learn new things from other people. But also, do it for yourself. Don't do it for the recognition. Don't do it for the clicks or the thumbs up on the internet group. You be you. Be happy with where you're at and be happy to make changes as you go. So if you're down with that, if you're still here, it's time to reveal the secret sauce, the one true thing that stands above everything I've said so far. If you really, really want to find a rare bird, nothing is going to help you more than just go birding. Turn off your phone, log off the computer for a while. I'm not saying this to be cheesy. Literally, the more time you spend out looking at birds, the more likely you are to find something rare. And you're going to want to spend more time in the field if you're having fun doing it. So try to have fun, get out there. It's way better than all those other points that I mentioned. So that's the deal. There's a text version of these points at a link below if you want to check it out. A bunch of other ideas for birding and weather and concentrations and vagrants and hybrids and hotspots, etc., etc. If you've got any other secret weapons in your arsenal, or if you have any thoughts to add or query about what I've said, I'm always keen for discussion. You can either leave a comment or reach out to me. I always love talking about birds. And otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic time in the field. Yeah, even if your goal is not to find vagrants, whatever they are, have fun out there.
Oh.
Alrighty. My video on.
Stop the screen sharing.
So, what bird is this?
What bird is on screen right now?
Yeah.
That is a Leach's storm petrel.
Oh, I don't have the same picture as you.
No.
No. I'm still on the warbler.
Oh, okay. Warbler. Yeah. Actually, I guess that would be a good tech question, is if everybody's on the sort of end screen with a website link or if it's changed, but
There we are.
sure.
There we are.
I hope the video came through clearly for everyone. So it was initially recorded sort of under a different thought process. I guess I was just kind of testing to see how it would work out and been trying a few lately, but hope it came through clearly for everyone and the timing was good and the sound was good.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. So a few people were typing in the chat as we went. I'm going to put the grid back on here. Here we go. A few people were typing in the chat as we went. And was that a Kirtland's warbler?
Towards the end, yeah.
Toward the end, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A few people were asking. Yeah.
Point Peely in May. So we're coming up to that time of year again.
And then, yeah, and I've never seen one and Ken has, so that's just not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I'll start my video there.
cookie crumbles.
There we are. The cookie crumbles because he went birding one day when I didn't. There you go. That's the truth. So
Brandon,
cool. Does it?
I
Yeah.
have a quick question. What date did you see that Kirtland's? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was May 15th.
Yeah.
And it would have been 2008.
It's pretty, I've gone through the Kirtland's Warbler records for the park,
Yeah.
just because we always report them for species at risk, and it's very much that 13th to 18th range. So if you're at Peely during that time, it's usually when the Kirtlands are pushing through. If you're going to see a Kirtland's, you have a good chance at that time. And the records are almost all identical dates every year now.
Wow.
Yeah, that'd definitely be part of that notion of like the chance favors the prepared, right? Like once you've learned about the records and if it is a bird you're hoping to see, then you can definitely improve your chances.
Oh.
I can, yeah, like if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat or ask. I can, I guess, kind of quickly share some thoughts just about what I was hoping to achieve with the video. Like I kind of had my intro to it, but since there is such a excitement around vagrant birds in the birding community, that was sort of how I wanted to frame the video, from that, the one that tends to get the most attention right up front. But like I said, my goal overall was to not just highlight the vagrants, but the notion of like the more fun you have, the more likely you are going to want to be out in the field looking at birds. So myself included at times in the past have noticed that it's possible to get stressed out. Like if different things going on in your life or the weather or whatever just kind of gets in the way of whatever you were planning on doing in a certain day. Or I've definitely noticed in the past sometimes I might have some sort of plan and then I end up just driving really far and I find the drive gets me down. I've just kind of thought of that notion of like, well, the more fun you have, and if you have fun birding your local patch or even your own backyard, if that cuts out that negative element like driving for you, encourages you to just kind of be out more. And the more you're out, the more you see, the more you learn.
So Brandon, you mentioned in the video that there was text kind of attached to that. Where would people find that?
Yeah, I can send the link in the chat actually.
That'd be
It
great.
was something
Thank you.
that I initially I just kind of wrote as like a fun little set of notes, but as I've been trying my hand at more video stuff, I thought I would try to turn it into a video.
Yeah. Some really good points there too, things to think about. Ellen is asking, what should we look for May 9th to 11th at Prince Edward County Point Bird Observatory? Going there next weekend.
A good question. I did a good chunk of work in the county. Trying to think of the years, like maybe 2008 to 2013 range. I had a bunch of different work assignments in the area, so I really loved Point Peter, as the locals call it, or Point Petrie, you might see, which is like the southernmost point. And then sort of from that area across to the bird observatory at Prince Edward Point, that whole sort of southern shore. Whenever I used to have work to do from like 9 to 5 in the middle of the day, and I would like wake up, drive out to the southern end, bird, until the last minute I had until I had to turn around and drive up somewhere else in the county for work. But I'd say that sort of like May window, if you're keen on rare birds like vagrants, I think almost anything is possible in May. That's part of what gets us out in the field. I think we love seeing all the super colorful vagrants and migrants and first of the years and the local breeders all coming back. Like it's kind of that combination of everything. So yeah, from the vagrant perspective, it's hard to pick one, but that mid-May window is probably like anything is possible time of year.
Brendan, I'm wondering if I can share a little story that perhaps illustrates your talk here tonight. When Margaret and I first started birding in the 70s, we were in Scarborough Beach area in Maine, with her grandfather, Murray Spears.
Mhm.
And we were looking at shorebirds along the beach. And we saw what was fairly obviously a godwit, but sort of looked at it and I said, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's not Hudsonian, it's not marbled. And Murray had his big long telescope, his astronomy telescope that he used to use. And he looked and I asked him what it was and he just said, and looked and looked and looked. And after about 10 minutes of observation, finally came out and said, well, I think it's a bar-tailed godwit. And in fact, it turned out to be, and I think a lot of people actually came in to see that bird.
Yeah.
But it really sort of showed us what it takes in observing to stick with it, and exactly what you said, look at all of the features and does it align with what you know? And if it doesn't, what else could it be? Just, it was a nice memory.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's exciting. Actually, as you were telling that story and how you have to think and learn and you're not necessarily going to know what it is right away, especially if it's a bird that you're not expecting to see there. It's not how our brains tend to work, right? We work on familiarity. I've worked a lot in the past and been in the field with botanists quite a bit, like people who study and identify plants. And I at times remember thinking I was quite jealous of how easy it was for them to take a branch or some leaves home and then they kind of get the whole evening after the sun goes down to keep studying. So I've actually kind of used that as a measure for what makes a day kind of extra special in the field for the last little while, is when I come home with something where it's okay, now I've got something to study that I want to learn more about, whether it's a rare bird or not, right? It's just anything that I saw that was different, then I can expand the learning and the fun later. So that's what kind of I was thinking of when you were telling that story.
Do you use any apps or different things like that to say track weather patterns and stuff?
Yeah, so I put the link actually to that website just with the text points that sort of helped form the presentation. I noticed someone had mentioned in the chat too, some of the other videos that I've worked on recently, and one of them is where I just kind of go through all the weather websites that I use. So it's not actually in a kind of coherent fashion at all. It's just I've actually compiled a list of all the different sources of weather information that I use, and then I just kind of go through them one by one and just sort of highlight what it is that I pull from them. So yeah, the link that I send is to that specific page. I can send the overall sort of website link. I'm just kind of hosting it on Google Sites for free. It's not like a fancy domain or anything, but so that's kind of the collection of everything. This is probably going to be a 30 to 40 year project for me to slowly tweak and get it into a format that I'm happy with.
Great Lakes birding.
Yeah. I just have
Do
so
you
much
have
fun
a,
birding here.
do you have a YouTube channel yourself then?
Yeah, I don't have a channel, but it's I have a channel in terms of where I host this kind of stuff. My goal is to kind of, yeah, I'll pull that up. So I'm going through the website. I'm just trying to find my different links here. People obviously, yeah, they can search through this as they go, but this is a long version of the weather tools section. It has a bit of text sort of describing. Oh, and actually, yeah, so the last link that I just sent, if you scroll down near the bottom of the page, I've actually embedded the YouTube video that I recorded. And it's 34 minutes of me just slowly going through each one of those links in more detail with sharing my screen. I'll post just the straight on the YouTube one as well. I will share as I pull this up, one of my other sort of goals or themes with this presentation and some of the stuff I've been working on has been to try to share that message of how certain, not like definitely not everybody, but you notice like everybody's different, but you sort of notice groups of people maybe who are on the computer a lot, or, are really getting into the social media side of it. And I've heard people, say the pros and cons of having like emoji reactions to posts and things like that. Like it can definitely be fun and a wonderful part of the community, but also, there's been studies showing that how likes on social media kind of hijack your brain and try to keep you on the computer as long as possible, rather than like get you outdoors and like experiencing some fresh air and like seeing things that aren't on a screen. So I kind of wanted to have that part in there, which is funny, right? As I record videos and post them on YouTube and stuff, it's like it's kind of a mix between the two, but at least maybe if it's highlighted. I also noticed that as people, talk about the challenges that we face with social media and this sort of digital world and misinformation. And one of the things I found that has helped me in the last couple of years, I guess, through the pandemic and now, is kind of the thought of maybe creating or, sharing information with like-minded people, more so than just like scrolling through Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and seeing, posts of bird photos. Like you can kind of pass long periods of time like that if you need to. I'm sure we all did it during the pandemic when we were not able to go the places we wanted to go, but kind of wanted to thread the needle between the two there, where it's like, don't be afraid to, like, if you want to get out and learn about birds, find rare birds, see unusual things or see new birds, that convince yourself to spend a little extra time turning off the electronics.
I think we spent, especially during the pandemic, we spent a lot more time just outside birding in our yard, in our neighborhood, around town, because we weren't in the city and we could do that. But kind of the downside is, if you have seen something unusual, there's nobody, like,
Yeah.
you can't share it with anyone. And and I'm in a sort of a semi-remote part of Ontario, and there's nobody else in town that birds. So when I see something kind of unusual, I get nervous. I don't want to, nobody wants to look kind of foolish and saying they saw something and then have it turn out not to be that.
Yeah.
But there's no one around to bounce it off of a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of the birding community too, right? There tends to be a lot of great people involved in the hobby, so it's nice to like share those experiences with people too when they come up. So.
Well, does anybody have any more questions for Brandon, or stories of your own rarity finding things? Roxanne, you posted a beautiful picture this week of the Oregon junco.
Yeah, and I think it was my first one, and it comes to support what Brendan was saying, bird every bird, right? Everyone in the Northeast right now was like under a full junco invasion. We have 70 to 80 per yard. The junco's moving everywhere for the last week. And it can get just hypnotizing. And I try to look at every one of them, and they just keep moving. But yeah, it pays off to look at every single bird. It's so easy to look and say, there's 70 juncos out there, they're all slate colored, but to really stop, and that I don't get bored looking at the same species for hours and trying to find the difference in the females and the younger birds, and just, yeah, it really, and Brendan, thank you. You gave so many nice tips and really good.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Colleen is asking, Brandon, do you use eBird to record your rare bird sightings?
Yeah, I use eBird. I try to get my checklists out. I've gone through quite an ebb and flow with eBird over the years. Like I first started using it in like 2009, probably, as the sort of widespread adoption really kicked off. I think probably before the pandemic, but like through like leading up to the pandemic, and then through there, and then up until about a year or two ago, I actually kind of switched to an anonymous eBirder tag that's available to people, just so I was keen to get my sightings out there. especially want to share. I find a lot with like young birders that I meet in the field. You know, I think at times I could view this hobby as this is a thing I do for myself, and I don't really need to make it public. You know, I could just keep notebooks and have a blast, you know, and meet people face to face kind of thing, as opposed to using that sort of more public database. But yeah, like I like to support it. I went sort of anonymous for several years, and then I've kind of come back around again. So we kind of went through an ebb and flow of like that notion of when you, Andy, were saying how like crows are rare and you kind of get asked to put comments in a lot. Like I had some of those ups and downs that we all experience with, are your comments good, or your checklist submitted correctly, or, you know, reports being accepted or whatever. And I think that was actually the basis towards one of my end thoughts on this video when I sort of said, definitely if you love birding and bird study, like really focus on making sure you're like happy with how things are going, like do it for yourself. And then, you know, I'm a big supporter of citizen science and keeping it going, but yeah, over time I realized like definitely going to enjoy this hobby more and learn more and have more to share if I'm focusing on having fun. Right? And then, yeah, definitely now every time I go birding, like I like it. It's kind of my digital notebook, where rather than writing things down, I like to submit it into eBird and hope that it's kind of always going to be there when I want to revisit those records.
Yeah. I have some juncos, Roxanne, but we have the Canada geese have come back. When you say bird every bird, I spend a long time, probably every day, just scanning. Our backyard backs onto a golf course, and there's just geese, so many geese. But since we've lived in this house, we've seen like greater white-fronted almost every year, and the snow goose.
Yep.
And it's surprising how difficult it is to pick out something that once you see it there, you're like, oh, that's so obvious. How did I miss it? But they can hide in there.
Yeah. And we've had a hybrid as well.
Yeah, we had a hybrid last year.
Yeah. Like people will talk about how sometimes like the doldrums of winter can be slow, and you know, for birding, right, in the hobby, like it can be a slog at times, but I like had some of the best birding I've had this winter, just sitting looking through flocks of ducks on the St. Clair River. You know, there's been a lot of Lambton birders like Mike Bowman, Josh Bowman, for years now have been documenting these hybrid Athea ducks, so like redhead canvasback hybrids, redhead ringneck duck hybrids, like scaup hybrids with like,
what?
They keep finding these hybrid ducks, and I finally kind of got out there at the right time and the right weather, and I just like parked my car on the side of the road and would like just stare at these flocks of ducks, because the hybrids were fairly subtle at times, and then you'd finally pick one out and it would stand out. And but it really like boosted my birding from that. Like I just had a blast, even though, you know, I didn't really see anything like rare that might count on a list, but I was trying to get pictures of them and trying to see which new ones I could find. And something actually I thought was really exciting too, and you'd mentioned like you see lots of Canada geese. I'll share this in the comment section. But one of our Ontario homegrown birders, you know, Nathan Hood, was birding in late March in the Rainy River area. You know, he got this picture, if you click on the link, but he's got, you know, these two Canada geese that just sort of stood out as being totally different than the other Canada geese nearby. They were bigger, they were like a different color, they were more aggressive, and like I just thought it was one of those cool examples where people might think Canada goose study isn't very exciting, and it was like, oh man, I wish I saw like those birds. Like I need to watch for that when I'm in the field. Like, do these geese that look like this ever show up in Southern Ontario? Like, where are they from? So
What?
then we've like reached out to some goose experts too. There's a birder I met at Peely way back in the day named Cameron Cox, who's big into waterfowl goose study, and I'm kind of waiting to hear back from him to see if he's got any thoughts on sort of what population those two might be from.
Maria is commenting she likes when you share on Discord about things that are happening or good days, or coming up, go birding and stuff. What channel do you use for Discord?
Thanks for that.
Like
I keep an eye on like the counties near my house mostly.
Yeah.
But I haven't I mean, I think I view Discord as one of those things where, yeah, you love to be part of the community and chat with people that you're friends with and keep an eye on what everyone's seeing around the province, but also try not to spend too much time on the computer. Like I'm already distracted by enough things on there. So if I usually have something to share, it's kind of I try to think of like what area or what audience it might be interesting to, and I usually try to keep it lighthearted too from that have fun perspective. Try to share some hopefully interesting educational thoughts, but yeah.
I remember when I was a relatively new birder, not even that new, and we all had a field guide. You had a book, like a book, and you carried it around, and everybody, one of the pieces of advice that they would tell new birders all the time was, look at the bird for a while and don't bother trying to look it up in your book. But it's so true, because while you're flipping through your book, something happens, something new shows up, or that bird takes off and leaves, you know. So it's not just social media and your phone, but
Yeah.
you got to look at the bird.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I found that, yeah, with eBird too. I've noticed a lot of people that I've been out with, sometimes they spend a lot of time, like it's great to have that good data right in the database, but I've definitely seen birds flying by that, get missed by people who are updating their checklists, right, and adding tallies to the list. So
That's me.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm looking on my phone to, count how many whatever and write some notes, and Ken's telling me, hey, something just flew over.
Yeah. This isn't really part of the presentation, but I've bought some of those like little metal clickers. They're actually fairly cheap, like that just allows you to count birds. And instead of like using the count features or like writing down, I'll usually pick like 2 or 3 species of birds, and I'll even like hold the clickers in my hand while I'm looking through binoculars. So if it's a day when there's lots of birds and you're like, having a hard time keeping track of how many there are, I'll just pick like one species. It's like, all right, how many Baltimore Orioles do I see today? And as I go, I just kind of click one at a time. And then at the end of the day, I'll have like an exact count for at least one species of birds. And then I think like if I'm going to estimate the other numbers, it's like, okay, well, Baltimore Oriole was more common than rose-breasted grosbeak. So if I had 15 Orioles, I'll put down 6 grosbeaks just because I think I saw like more than twice as many. And I found that to be kind of a good way to make sure my data is a little more accurate, but not staring at the screen too much when I'm out.
It's always, we use the clickers sometimes at some of the hawk counts that I've done. And the worst is the day when you get handed the Blue Jay clicker at Holiday Beach when it's a 30,000 day.
Yeah.
And you're clicking off hundreds instead of single birds.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it though. Like if just from my enjoying birding experience, I've been really, really surprised. And I find, it's not too distracting. It's not too much to ask, but it's really, really surprising sometimes at the end of the day when you look at your clicker, like it's not what you would think or what you'd normally put on a checklist. I know like Kaya and Alessandra clicked yellow warblers one day at Point Pelee last May. I don't know if many people saw that, but they carried around clickers all day, walked all the trails just to see how many yellow warblers there actually are in the park, and ended up with over 1,000 that they'd clicked, right? And it's like you wouldn't really think you'd see 1,000 yellow warblers in a day, whereas they were just kind of.
I would.
Yeah.
Just
I think
as much time as I have in the park, but still, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. That was like an incredible effort, but I think it set the eBird high count for Ontario right away, right? Like as soon as kind of someone really just answered the question, like let's go around and put in the work and see how many there are. But
eBird argues with you.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Too many zeros. Well, look, it's getting pretty close to 8 o'clock. So we have time for 1 or 2 more comments if anyone has something they'd like to toss in there before we wrap it up. A lot of people, by the way, are putting in the chat their thanks, Brandon, for an excellent presentation. And absolutely, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, really appreciate everybody coming out.
It was fantastic, and we all love to talk about birds.
Yeah. I guess in the presentation too, if anybody does have any like questions that come up later on, like you can send me a message on Discord, or like it is a YouTube link to the video, so you could just leave a comment there. Like chatting about birds if you think of anything later on. there's different ways you can just reach out.
Perfect.
Mhm.
All right, then I'm going to say one more time, thank you to everybody for coming. And thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. It's still daylight where I am anyways. Maybe I'll go birding for a few more minutes while I can. Go out and scan the geese.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and that will call it a night.
Thanks
Good
so much for
night,
setting that up, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording. There we go.